Welcome to the joint meeting of the city county governments, and we'll do a pledge of allegiance to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you have cell phones, please silence them. And I believe that's the only business. We'll start with the presentation of Siouxland Heritage Museum Special Enterprise Fund Report with Bill Hoskins.
Excuse me, Mayor, we need to approve our regular agenda, please.
I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Excuse me, we got to do roll call first. I haven't done a joint meeting before. So.
You're doing well.
County is Cindy and Gerald and Dick Kelly.
And if we can have a roll call of the City Council as well.
Councilors Aguilar?
Here.
Anderson?
Here.
Brown?
Here.
Entman? Erpenbach?
Here.
Jameson?
Here.
Karski?
Here.
Rolfing?
Here.
We do have 7 members present, so we can proceed.
And the city and county of quorum, yes. Now, Bill, now you may go.
We do need a motion.
We still need to approve the agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
Move to approve the
Stay
city
there.
agenda.
Second on the city side.
Move to approve the county agenda.
Second.
I have motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
If we could have a roll call of the City Council, please, to approve tonight's regular agenda.
Who made the motion again, please?
Brown.
Seconded by Erpenbach?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilors Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
And that is passed 7-0. Thank you.
Now, Bill Hoskins.
Bill Hoskins, Director of Siouxland Heritage Museums. Good afternoon. This is the required annual report for the Museum Special Enterprise Fund. The Museum Enterprise Fund is something that was set up in a joint resolution between the City of Sioux Falls and Minnehaha County, originally in, I'm going too far ahead, in 1996. In 2000, it was revised. The Enterprise Fund receives revenues and accounts for expenses associated with the rental of space in the museum system, sponsorships, and in the provision of programs, events, and services for which a fee is charged. The Enterprise Fund's annual budget is something that's determined in a joint budget hearing between the city and the county. The funds interact with our operations budget at different times. The fund is administered by Minnehaha County, and in that joint resolution, the revenues in excess of expenses are retained by the fund and used to further the mission of the Siouxland Heritage Museums. Over the years, the fund balance, generally speaking, our expenses have been less than our receipts, not always. As you can see, in 2007, for instance, our expenses far exceeded our receipts. But that was because in that year we reused some of the money we had generated to produce new exhibits at the Pettigrew Home and Museum, the second floor exhibits in 2007. But generally we are making money. The fund income in 2011 was $159,306. Our expenses, $104,482. That was a bit below what we had projected as a budget back in 2010. And the fund balance at the end of the year was $162,517. Well, what do we really do with the fund? We use the fund today to pay for our educational program. It's supporting all the programs that the museum do in our 2012 budget. It's supporting most of our expenses for our exhibitions at the Old Courthouse and Pettigrew Home and Museum. It is supporting artifact conservation and restoration, as well as all the supplies we use for collections management. Rentals of our facility, there were 74 last year at the Old Courthouse Museum. The expenses associated with the rental provision and the income all flows through the enterprise fund. And we also have special projects that we do. Some of those are we do exhibit services for which we charge a fee. That's on a limited basis, but that's some of the different things that we do in the enterprise fund. Example of some of our programs, the concert series is something that we do every year. We had 26 concerts. They're free to the public. That's a program that is primarily through sponsorship dollars. We get sponsorships from different individuals and organizations, and in turn pay for the cost of the concert series. Another program for which fee is charged, a couple examples. One is the Victorian Girls Tea over at the Pettigrew Home and Museum. It's a nominal fee. It's like a half-day day camp where kids can come over and try out high tea. Another very successful program that we started in 2010 was the Ghost and Graves Tour. We did this 2 years in a row. This is a program where we get volunteer actors, and it's really turned into an event that generates quite a bit of revenue for the museum. We sell tickets for that. Exhibits is another area where we use the enterprise fund. Last year in 2011, we opened Vietnam in Our Words, an exhibit that deals with the Vietnam War. We interviewed about 40 area veterans about some of their experiences. This exhibit uses a lot of touchscreen video and gives the visitor the chance to pick and choose topics that they're interested in learning about. Why was it in the enterprise fund? We got a grant for $10,000 from the Daughters of the American Revolution to help pay for the exhibition. Rentals. We're doing quite a bit of rental of the space at the courthouse, primarily the courtroom and law library. Weddings make up about 55% of those rentals. Here's an example of the room set up for that. In 2009, the state auditor, and I probably mentioned this last year, but I'll mention it once more because it has impact on our balances, decided that revenue we received from the museum's endowment. Siouxland Heritage Museums has an endowment set up in 1993 at the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation. As of June of last year, there was approximately $925,000. We're getting about $40,000 a year in income. Anyway, before 2010, that revenue was going into a grants account. It was treated as a grant to the museum and handled that way. The state auditor felt that funds and funds we received from the Museum's Alliance, which is a private nonprofit friends group, should be going into the enterprise fund and accounted in the enterprise fund instead of that grants account. So that's having an effect when you look back at our receipts versus income. It's gone up quite a bit in 2010, 2011, and it has in 2012 as well. And that's one of the primary reasons. Those funds that are coming into the enterprise fund then from the endowment or the alliance are obligated funding. So in the one of the reports, you'll see the sort of the written report. There is a sheet, a spreadsheet on those obligated projects because the money was granted essentially specifically for those projects. In 2011, the enterprise fund accounted for about 9% of the total expenses for the museum. The city paid for half of the operations budget and maintenance budget for the Pettigrew, the county for half of the operations budget, the maintenance budget for the old courthouse. The courthouse costs a little bit more to maintain than the Pettigrew. It's a bigger building, so that's one of the reasons the county is a little bit higher in the percentage. I will end it there. If anybody has questions, I'm more than happy to answer. This is one of those things that in the joint resolution setting it up is just a requirement that we do an annual report to the council and the commission.
Are there any questions of Bill? Seeing none, you got a big crowd here. Okay, thank you, Bill. Good report. The next one will be the presentation of the Helpline Community Trends Report by Janet Lally. Hyphenated Lally.
That's okay. I think you all have I can give you hard copies, but I think you have electronic copies, but.
We've got it online.
The Helpline Center compiles an annual report every year, community trends based upon the phone calls that we receive through the 211 phone number. So what you have in front of you is a summary of what we experienced in 2011. Let me just hit some of the highlights for you. I'll draw your attention to the center panel. On that page, it talks about the total call volume. You'll notice our total call volume in 2011 for the Sioux Falls area was just over 41,000 phone calls. That is a decline in the 211 calls that we previously have seen. And this is the first year since we've had 211 in existence that our phone call volume has actually decreased. So we suspect there's a couple of reasons behind that. It was just a small decrease, but weather. It was nice, warm weather. Don't have as many people requesting utility assistance or use of the Scoop It program to shovel snow for elderly and disabled. So that probably attributed to some of the call volume decrease. And then also we suspect that more people are using our services online. As opposed to dialing 211, they're going to our resource database, which is online. And as long as I'm speaking about that, if you haven't had an opportunity to go to the Helpline Center website as of late, as of April 2nd, we introduced a new online database search tool. So you'll find it much easier and efficient to use. It's like a Google search bar. So you just type in whatever service you're looking for, whether that's food, shelter, financial assistance, and it will pop up those resources that meet those needs in our community and surrounding areas. So very simple to use. The other phone calls on the top there talk about total South Dakota 211 phone calls. We also answer for the Black Hills, the 211 phone number out there. So you can kind of get a picture of the call volume out there also. The pie chart delineates the different types of phone calls that we take at 211. We take primarily what we call information and referral calls. Information calls are calls from individuals who need government or social service, health and human service information, and oftentimes know the name of the agency, just kind of need to know the address, the phone number, qualifications, or how to get there. So pretty simple kinds of questions that we answer for them. Referral phone call is much more extensive. Those are calls from individuals who have a need but have no idea where to get that need met. As an example, we just had a phone call shortly before I came down here from a young woman who was pregnant and single and needed to look for some financial resources as a young pregnant mother, what was out there in our community to help her. So we were able to connect her with several different resources out there. So that would be a referral phone call. Listening and support is pretty straightforward. We listen and offer support Many times people will call 211 because they're struggling with depression, anxiety, relationship issues. The list could go on, and we literally listen and offer support in that time of need. Now, when that escalates to more of a crisis situation, that would be the smallest piece of our pie, and that would be somebody who is suicidal. A domestic violence situation, child abuse are the most common ones that we find underneath that for the crisis phone calls. Small piece of the pie, take a long time on the phone. Most of those phone calls can last anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour when we're on the phone with them, de-escalating that crisis. The online database statistics are right next door to that, so you can clearly see that that continues to grow every year. In the center of the panel, you'll also notice needs with significant increases. We try at 211 to demonstrate over the past year what we believe the most needs are, the increase that we've seen in the needs in our community. And when you look at that, I won't go through all of those with you in detail, but clearly under basic immediate needs, you will see a couple of subcategories that have seen a large increase this past year, primarily diapers and baby items. We have a lot of young people in our community that have children and are struggling to meet ends, have enough money to support their family. And so diapers and those baby items are extremely expensive when you're living on a low income or a fixed income. So we've just seen an increase in people looking for resources for that. And then on down the list, you can see a variety of increases. I'll draw your attention to the very last one, which is transportation. With mass transit. And we have received many more phone calls this past year from people who want to access information about our transit program in the City of Sioux Falls. And so people want to know what time the bus runs, what are the routes, how much does it cost, how do I get there, those kinds of questions from folks who have never really used the bus system before. So I think that just lends itself to say that people are either accessing that because they need to financially, or they're also looking at what's good for the environment and using less of their cars and using more of the bus system. So those are the needs with significant increases. If you go to the left panel, it talks about the top 10 requested resources. This is kind of the primary reasons that people dial 211. You'll see the number one need on there is financial assistance, and that by far has been our number one need, I think, for the past 10 years. People who need that financial assistance, whether that's for utility assistance or rent or that kind of thing. Mental health is number two, which oftentimes surprises people, that the second common reason that people dial 211 is mental health issues. They're looking for mental health treatment, support, and information out there. And so 211 is a wonderful resource tool for them to use to find that. Third one is government. We receive a lot of phone calls. People don't necessarily understand the governmental system. It's quite confusing to the general public, who's federal government, who's state, who's county and city, and so on and so forth. So we spend a lot of time explaining that to people, whether they want to register to vote, where do they have to go to do that, or they have a problem with Social Security. So we covered the gamut there. And you can see on down the list the other top 10 reasons that people call 211. On the right side of the panel, the top part of that is all related to the suicide calls that we take. Even though that's a small portion of the phone calls, those are some of the most intense phone calls. What you'll see there is we classify our calls based on a level system. Level 1 is a call that the person has suicidal ideation. They've had some thoughts. Level 2, they also have a plan that they develop on how they would hurt themselves. And level 3 is that they've actually put that plan into place. Those are immediate interventions where we're involving law enforcement to get to them right away. And then the green ones, so to speak, are third-party phone calls, calls from family and friends worried about a loved one. And then suicide information, people just looking for statistics or what are the warning signs, that kind of information. And the last one is from survivors. Those are family and friends who have lost a loved one to suicide and are looking for support, grief information, which we offer at the Helpline Center. We do a support group. And you can see our total call volume for suicide calls is certainly up in 2011, more than 420 suicide-related phone calls. Statewide, it was just over 1,000 phone calls. And then we spoke with the Minnehaha County Coroner, and we also included the data on how many completed suicides we had in the Minnehaha County. And unfortunately, you can see that 2011 was a very difficult year for suicide in our community. The very bottom of that talks about unmet needs. And oftentimes this is the smallest piece of our our community trends, but the unmet needs generates the most conversation in the community when I go out and talk about it. These are the unmet needs that we find from callers, either because there was no service or program to meet their needs, or they had already utilized or exhausted the services that are currently available in the community. And sometimes those phone calls depend upon what time of the month that comes. Many of our community agencies provide assistance for rent or for utility assistance, sometimes run out of dollars at the beginning of the month. So if that phone call comes later in the month, it will be tracked as an unmet need because those agencies are out of dollars to support that individual. The top one, transportation, that I think has been like that for many years. Transportation, as you all well know, is challenging in our community for somebody who's on a fixed income or a low income. And so some of those examples are people looking for gas vouchers, rides to doctor's appointments, rides to other kinds of appointments that they have in the community, and sometimes just transportation to get to work if the transit system doesn't run at the hours that they need to get to and from work. The financial assistance other is kind of a catch-all category of unmet needs. So there's a lot of different things that fall underneath that. But we have a lot of requests in there for individuals who need to get an identification card or a license, but there's always a fee attached to that. And in South Dakota, that fee is fairly reasonable. I think it's only like $15 or $20. But if you have to request that information from an outlying community, it can be up to $50. And for a person who has little to no money, that's a lot to ask from them. The rent and mortgage assistance is pretty straightforward. Dental care and treatment, even though we have programs in our community to serve low-income individuals with dental care, we don't necessarily have enough programs or programs that somebody could access without having to pay anything towards it. Sometimes the challenge is somebody who's on Medicaid is finding a dentist that will accept Medicaid as a payment. We have a lot of dentists in our community, but not all of them accept new Medicaid patients, and that's where the challenge comes in for many people. And utility assistance is also pretty straightforward, so I won't go into details with that. So that's just very quickly summary of kind of what the 211 has seen over the past year with needs and unmet needs. So certainly happy to answer any questions that you may have about that.
Does anyone have a question of Janet? I do have one on the
Sure.
financial assistance, the lack of relocation outside the Sioux Falls city limits. Would you
Sure.
expand on that a little?
Absolutely. There's a program, if a person moves within the city limits of Sioux Falls, there's a program called Moving Assistance Program, or MAP, and they will help actually physically move a person from one apartment to another. But if that person actually is moving to a small community outside of Sioux Falls, that MAP program doesn't serve that. They serve within the city limits of Sioux Falls. So that is an unmet need.
Is that a significant issue, or is it?
I would say it's a growing issue as our communities continue to expand beyond the city limits. We have more and more people who live outside that area, and so when they're looking for affordable housing, oftentimes they end up in some of our smaller communities. Yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. No questions? I don't see any. Okay, thank you, Janet. The third thing on our agenda is the changing of the dates of the joint meetings to Tuesdays. I guess, Sue, would you like to start on that?
Sure. Recently, the City Council has changed their meeting dates to Tuesdays. It will become effective May 1st. And so we're hoping that the Minnehaha County Commission will agree to change the joint meeting date to the third Tuesday of the month, same time, same place.
We have had some discussion in the last few weeks since we were made aware that the change was going to be made. In our discussion, a lot of the conversation has been the starting time. And I know you got your information and everything, but we really would agree to the Tuesday if, and I'm speaking for the commission, correct me if I'm wrong, Gerald or Cindy, but We would agree to meet, but we would like to meet at 5 o'clock as part of that agreement. It causes problems for one of our members who does some teaching at night.
Okay.
It
No, we would just shorten our informational meetings. I can't speak for the group. Was there any input from my fellow counselors? We could always, I guess if we had wanted to continue after the joint meeting, we could suspend the informational meeting, have the joint meeting at 5, and then reconvene.
Rex, was that your question? Or-
That's exactly what was my suggestion.
Okay.
The suggestion I was going to make, yeah.
So I'm looking at the city attorney. I have no problem. We'll have to change it. Is it an ordinance or? Okay.
I think we can just agree. Cindy, Gerald, are you comfortable with that then? And I think it reflects the other two also, so.
And I
We would be
understand-
agreeable to a 5 o'clock Tuesday meeting, yes.
And I understand that wouldn't start until June, though,
That'd be fine.
because I think you've already posted for a meeting.
We got posting, okay.
Right. So this would take effect in June.
Ken, did you want to
I
comment?
understand that there is some planning
Introduce
issues,
yourself,
joint planning
please.
issues already in the pipeline. Ken McFarland from Commission Administrative Officer.
Okay.
So it
then,
looks like we have agreement.
Yeah, I think we got a deal there, if that's. Is there any old business to come before the group? Gerald?
I guess in that conversation, Dick, when we did talk about the joint meeting, we did suggest in a letter, I think, to consider having the Lincoln County Commissioners join us on a regular basis, not maybe all the time, but when there was an opportunity for joint conversation, that we'd be able to do that. As we well know, 57th Street South, which is Lincoln County, is probably the fastest growing and frankly, needs to be included in some of the conversations about planning, zoning, and other issues. So there's nothing wrong with a conversation about some metro management issues or, frankly, some long-range planning.
Councilman Erkham.
I was just going to add that, as you know, the City Council does meet with Lincoln County Commission on a fairly regular basis anymore. It used to be pretty hit and
Twice a
miss,
year.
but now we're probably 4 times a year with them, but not a bad idea to bring the 3 groups together. We couldn't do it in this room unless we got smaller chairs or something, but we certainly could do that. That's a great idea.
Well, even if it's an issue between Sioux Falls and Lincoln County or Sioux Falls, Mayock County, I think it's important the other governmental entity understand and hear the issue, because basically it does affect us all. And in our discussions, we had talked about desiring to include Lincoln County. Perhaps, you'd roll it into your meeting with them or something, but even if there's not a zoning issue on, I think it's important that we talk.
So are you suggesting every meeting then, that we have it joint with Lincoln?
I think that's what we were thinking. Is that right, Gerald?
That's what we were thinking, but we're flexible, I think.
And if you guys, if your group would like to talk about it, and we can continue the communication. I don't know that it's anything. It's just something we wanted to bring up today and for your perusal. Yeah.
Because you do realize that we alternate going down to Lincoln County in our meetings with Lincoln County. We do, one here, and then we go down to Lincoln County for the next. But
So
maybe
you
we
and
could
I
get
will
them
be-
to agree to.
You and I will be involved in the discussion also then. Okay. If that's okay, yeah, Jim.
Dick, there might be such a thing, too, that the leadership of the respective bodies might determine there might be a need just for some joint dialogue, and even if it's the chair of the council or the county, whatever, I mean, if you think, or in our staff's presentation, if you think that it necessitates us getting together, I think that's one of the opportunities we can determine at the time if we need to do that. I think it'd be pretty easy to do.
I didn't mean to go around you, Your Honor. But,
If you need me, let me know, I'll be there.
okay.
But if you don't, that's okay too.
Well, then, Sue and I will continue this discussion, but it sounds like it's acceptable to everybody that we
Sure, you bet.
give it some serious thought. Okay, and I don't know if that was new or old business, so if there's any other business to be conducted, I'll entertain a motion on the county's part to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
And if there's a motion from the city council to
Move to
adjourn.
adjourn, Erpenbach.
It's been a motion by Councilor Urbanbach and it was seconded by Councilor Rolfing to adjourn tonight's meeting. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Entenmann?
Yes.
Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Thank you.
We're adjourned.
That is passed 8-0. And to the people of Sioux Falls, we've got another meeting at 7 o'clock. We hope you all join us.